Hey, Smarter Vets. This is CJ Burnett, owner and financial advisor with Florida Veterinary Advisors. Looking forward to this webinar where I'm going to go through how to get financially married, right? So a lot of you might be just getting married, like you're almost there, your wedding's coming up. Some of you probably got married last year, and some of you may just have never actually gotten married with your finances. Maybe you 20 years in marriage, 30 years in marriage. I know that for a lot of people that I've met with, they can go 5, 10 years sometimes and never actually look at what they need to do from a financial perspective when it comes to marriage. So today, I'm hoping that you get some value out of this just from knowing what things you can do especially whenever you get married. Some of it's state specific, so keep that in mind, because sometimes some of the things that I talk about may be only for Florida or Georgia or North Carolina. So depending on what state that you're in will depend on the different options that are available to you, especially when it comes to a lot of the things that I talk about. So today's webinar, I'm going to go through a few different things when it comes to finances, but I'm also going to be talking a lot about marriage in general. Some things that I've learned. So I was married when I was 20. I was 20 years old, so I actually couldn't legally drink at my wedding. Funny enough, we had sparkling apple cider on the tables, and even a lot of my friends were not old enough where they could actually drink. So I've been married for a while. I'm going to share some of my insights to what I've experienced in marriage when it comes to finances, when it comes to personalities, when it comes to just overall general conflict resolution. Not too much in this presentation. Now, if you have some, I would say, issues around budgeting, there is another webinar that we did this month. You can go back, you can look for it on our Facebook page. That's specifically around budgeting with a reluctant spouse. So if you have a spouse and they're not really on the same page with you when it comes to spending money, it would probably be a good webinar for you to check out. It's got some tips and tricks in there on just how to navigate that difficult situation that you may be in. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's material on how to get married financially, how to get finance married. Now, when you first got married, you probably had some ideas as far as what marriage was going to look like. So obviously we talk about two becoming one, right? There's a spiritual thing that happens there, but there's also some other things that happen with our personalities that can change us throughout marriage. And there's really two different philosophies that we find that people approach marriage from, and it bleeds into the financial piece as well. The first philosophy is this idea where the person gets married and they don't really feel like they need anybody else, right? You don't need a best friend. You don't need, like, your spouse is your best friend, and really you can never see another soul on this planet again, and you'd be perfectly satisfied being married to that one person and always doing everything that you do with that one person. Second philosophy is this kind of philosophy where you're still your own individual, but you're married, but you still have things that you want to do outside. Like, you want to go and hang out with friends. You still want to have some time that's apart, right? So there's two different, I'd say, philosophies that I've experienced and approaches to marriage when it comes to the individuals and how they view themselves in context to the marriage. Both of them are right. Neither of them are wrong. Right. It's just a matter of, you just really want to make sure that in your marriage that your spouse has the same philosophy that you do. Otherwise, there's a lot of conflict there, because one person wants to go and make financial decisions on their own, and the other person wants to make financial decisions together. And so then you have some conflict there. Something to be aware of. The other thing is the difference between a covenant relationship and a contractual relationship. So here I would say, marriage is seen more as a covenant, not as a contract. It's not a contract is more of an approach to 50-50, right? The relationship is 50-50. I give what I get, and I'm going to be in this relationship for as long as it benefits me. A covenant relationship is actually more of not a 50-50, but rather a 100-100, right? It's a matter of always focusing on giving, because if you're always focusing on giving and your spouse is always focusing on giving, then you're always going to be satisfied in that type of relationship. When it comes to marriage, these are actually books that I read, I'd say pretty late in my marriage. I think I was probably 7, 8 years married before I was introduced to Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart's a great book about the masculine heart, about kind of about men. Captivating is really a book about women, right? The feminine heart, if you will. I think they were really big game changers in my life, especially when it comes to my marriage, because I was able to understand my wife a whole lot more by reading Captivating. And, I think a lot of women find that they understand men a whole lot more. I know that we're pretty simple anyway. I get it, right? A lot of you are probably laughing. You're like, I don't need to understand men. Yeah, you probably already understand men. But you know what? Wild at Heart is a good book to read around the masculine heart and around what really drives men. And then the Seven Principles to Making Marriage Work was a really interesting book that I read a few years ago. It's the things in there are very contrary to a lot of the things that I was taught during premarital counseling, contrary to a lot of the things that I heard from older couples who had been married 30, 40 years. And so, sometimes, especially when you have a marriage where two imperfect people are trying to figure out how to get on the same page as far as financial goals, it can be really helpful to recognize that sometimes conflicts aren't solved, but rather managed, and how to do that properly. So it's a really good book. Highly recommend it. The first thing that we'll go through is really protecting against unknown risks. So when you get married, there are some things that you have separate that then you can look at combining, and maybe having shared risk, or even shared policies. And by having stuff that's shared, sometimes you get discounts, right? Multi-policy discounts with auto insurance or things like that. So auto insurance, obviously, whenever you're getting married, you want to look at, okay, where are you going to live? What's the zip code? Get quotes as far as what auto insurance is going to look like with both of you on them. If you haven't combined auto insurance, you may be 6 months married, just haven't gotten around to it. I highly suggest that's kind of one of those things you should look into doing, because you might be spending more money than you should be on insurance that can protect you. Umbrella policies can also be there. So if you both have your own umbrella policy and you get married, the nice thing is whenever you move in together, you could effectively drop one of those umbrella policies. That'll save you $300-$600 a year, depending on what the premiums were. You've got homeowners insurance. That's kind of an obvious one. Homeowners insurance can obviously, it's really one policy for the house. So whenever you move together, usually that's easy to combine. I think health insurance is one of those things where you might have it offered through your work, they might have it offered through their work, and looking at both policies and seeing based upon your needs, and then deciding, okay, do you have each of your own, or do you have your spouse join yours, or vice versa, right? That can save you a lot of insurance premium as well. And what's nice about health insurance, if you have group health insurance, oftentimes whenever you get married, you have a certain period of time after you get married to be able to elect your health insurance. You don't have to wait till November to change your health insurance through your employer. If you get married, that's a qualified event to be able to change what your elections are on your health insurance. So right after you get married, I know this is, a huge priority for you to make sure your health insurance is in place, right? Just kidding. Right after you're married, but that might be something to put on the checklist of things to do, because you have a certain amount of time after you get married to be able to make those elections on health insurance. If you get married in February, you got a certain amount of time before you can change it. You don't have to wait till November whenever they come out with their group stuff again. Disability insurance, long-term care insurance, and life insurance. So these are three areas where you might have it offered through work. You can have individual policies. There's even things like life insurance survivorship policies where you can have them where the life insurance is combined on both of your lives, and it's what they call a last to die. There's a lot of really cool things out there when it comes to life insurance on how you might be able to structure how you organize your insurance portfolio around life insurance and disability insurance. So just keep that in mind. You can't really combine disability insurances. That's not a thing that I'm aware of. You really have disability insurance on you and disability insurance on them, whether it be a group policy or whether it be an individual policy. You really don't combine those. And it's the same thing with long-term care insurance. So let's talk about the fun things that everyone wants to get done, but no one ever really gets them done for like 10 or 20 years. So many people I've met with where if we going through their stuff and we're talking about their insurance portfolio, and then I get to legal documents, and they always go, oh yeah, we've been meaning to get that done. We've been meaning to get that done. Why haven't you gotten it done? Well, just because life, right? Because fires need to get put out, children need to get put to bed. So when you get married, consider going to see an attorney. Tell them how your lives are like, because depending on if you have previous marriages or children from previous marriages, that can all affect how your legal documents are going to need to be drafted. So you meet with an attorney, you sit down with them, you say, hey, I want an estate plan done. That's what they call it. If you want to write that down, an estate plan. And usually with that, you'll get things like trusts, wills, powers of attorney, healthcare surrogates, living wills. There are different things inside of legal documents where you designate people particular jobs in the event that certain things happen to you. So if you haven't scheduled an appointment with an attorney, I highly recommend, find an attorney around you, find somebody in your state. You always want to hire an attorney that's in your state, because it's state specific law around estate planning, and sit down with somebody and see what you need to do in order to look at making those changes. If you have children, obviously this is much more important than if you don't. But, even if you don't have children, they still can draft these documents in a way where they can assume that you have children, right? So you just meet with an attorney, find out what they suggest as far as what you should do on that end. All right. So when it comes to titling assets, so assets are everything that you own, right? If your home, your car, anything that has value to somebody else is considered an asset. Now, when it comes to assets, how you title them is important. The titling is who is the owner on paper of that asset. This can be checking accounts, it can be real estate, brokerage accounts, investment accounts. Now, one of the reasons why you might own assets jointly is because if one of you passes away, the other one still has access and still has control over what happens to the funds in that account, or to the ultimate management of that account. And there's a few different ways that you can own assets jointly. You can own assets jointly. There's something called tenants in common, joint tenants in common. It's where there's a fractional ownership per the people inside of that own the account. So if you have a joint account, tenants in common, then that means 50% of it is yours, 50% of it is your spouse's, right? That's how it's seen, at least from a titling on paper. There's something called joint tenants with rights of survivorship. So that is, where in the event that one of the spouses passes away, the remaining spouse will now have 100% of the account and be able to control it that way. And then there's tenants by the entirety. Some states allow you to own brokerage accounts, tenants by the entirety. And that's where it's not seen 50%, 50%. There's no fractional ownership. Rather, it's 100%, 100%. And so there are some actual benefits to that from a lawsuit perspective, where if you own it tenants by the entirety in certain states, then if one of the spouses is named in a lawsuit, the money is also considered 100% their spouse's. So there's no threat to that money being at risk to the people who are filing that lawsuit against them. Now, also consider how those assets are then transferred upon one of your passings or both of your passings. So there are things that you can do with accounts that you can put what they call payable on death or a transfer on death attribute to it, where in the event that both of you pass away, you can name a beneficiary. You can name somebody that account will then go to upon both of your passing, and you won't have to worry about that account being wrapped up in probate in the event that you don't have a trust set up. So at the end of the day, I got to say, consult an attorney on how you should title assets, right? We work specifically with clients on how to title assets as well. We have, we can't give all of the advice around everything, but there are certain areas that we specialize in that we can give you advice around, provided that you're in a position where you're like, I don't know what to do with my assets. Like, I don't know how I should own them. And we can help you guide there, but consulting an attorney is also a good idea. So if you agree with your spouse 90+% of the time on where you're spending money, then this could be a cash flow map that you adopt. A cash flow map is basically looking at how cash is flowing through someone's life to see where money is going. Now over here on the left-hand side, you'll notice that I have a little spot for your income. Here's your spouse's income. These two little blue lines represent the money that you're putting away, maybe in a 401k through work, right? This money comes out of your paycheck before you even see it. And then what's left over hits into your checking account. If you multiple checking accounts that you're managing here, you have one and your spouse has one. I'll ask a lot of people like, hey, why do you have them separate? And a lot of the times they don't know. They say, well, just kind of how it was when we got married. We never really decided to do anything else. Well, here's an idea. Maybe you could go at opening up a joint checking account, having your incomes go into one account, and simplifying your life to some degree, because if there is no reason why you have two accounts, let's try to look at making two become one. Again, two become one, right? Playing off of what I said earlier in the webinar on marriage. That joint savings account, that's the money that you're setting aside for emergencies and large purchases that you believe that are going to come up soon, like the roof that you're going to replace or the AC that you're going to buy. Then you have that red line, right? This red line down here represents just your household bills. So credit cards, mortgages, all that stuff that you got to pay will come out of the one account, right? And of course, you might have like a credit card that you spend some of that money off of to put in other places. And you might have like Netflix subscription that's coming out off of your credit card. And so all those bills basically get lumped together in household bills. And what this does is it provides simplicity on where money's coming in and where money's going out. And it allows for transparency enough to where you might be able to find fraud even as it happens, and it doesn't go completely unseen for months and months and months. Now you'll notice the wealth coordination account over here it's just a fancy name for an account. There's really no such thing as a wealth coordination account. It's just like a fancy name we give an account where you set up and you automatically send yourself in the future money. This is paying yourself in the future. Everything on the right side of the wealth coordination account is you later. It's for income producing assets that you will one day call upon because you're no longer going to be working, right? That's what they call retirement sometimes. And all of those income producing assets, as you're contributing to them, it's coming from your income to your retirement accounts. You might even have some retirement accounts that you're putting money away from your own like cash flow. So if you have an IRA, that's an example of a retirement account that isn't through your work, but it still comes from your paycheck. You take income from your paycheck and then you put money into an IRA. That's what this would be. So this wealth coordination account is the go-between. It's the purgatory of your assets before they get distributed to real estate and other types of things. So if you don't know anything about it, go listen to our podcast. We've got plenty of stuff around the wealth coordination account. There's enough resources out there that hopefully you'll be able to navigate that spot. Now, if you are one of those couples that, maybe you don't agree a ton of the time, and there's a lot of friction as far as, hey, you bought something and now I'm upset because you bought something when you were upset with me last week that we bought something, and conflict arises a lot of the times with certain spending decisions, this might be a better way to do it. You still have your joint checking account, but then you have two flex spending accounts, and you decide with your spouse in advance how much money is going to automatically go into each one of these checking accounts every month. And that money that you get, that gets deposited into your flex checking account, goes to whatever you want, 100%, anything you decide. And those expenses, those things that you buy, you have already agreed with your spouse that there's not going to be any judgment on the money that you spend. By doing that, by having no judgment expense management, I'm hoping that you can avoid a lot of conflict. I've seen this work in a lot of marriages. So, it kind of seems like a little bit extra work to have done, but this way you have your joint checking account. You both are being transparent with one another as far as how much money you're actually putting towards your long-term plan, how much money is going towards your household bills. And then you have your spouse flexing checking and your own flex checking account. We call them flex checking because it's flexible in how you can spend the money. A good thing to know about investments. So qualified retirement accounts can't be joint. 401ks and IRAs, those are usually in just your name only. You can't share them with the spouse. Brokerage accounts can be joint. So can real estate. So can taxable investments. So, understanding how you title them, right? Pay attention to how they're titled, who owns them on paper. What happens if one of you passes away prematurely? What happens if both of you pass away prematurely? Should you have a payable on death or a transfer on death set up so that upon something really bad happening, one of your family members gets to take the money and it doesn't go through probate, where there can be fees and there can be a lot of stuff that gets stuck in probate. Consider getting a power of attorney, where, if usually you'll get one whenever you meet with the attorney to get an estate plan done. But consider who that power of attorney should be, who can make financial decisions on your behalf should you become unable to do so. Right? You're in the hospital and you can't make financial decisions. Who can go and make sure your bills are getting paid and all those kinds of things. And then lastly, another good to know is that if you have an individual investment account that you're investing in and your spouse is not on that account, if you ever wanted to transfer those assets to a joint account, you'd have to sell the investments. A lot of people don't know this, but if I have an account just in my name that I'm buying and selling stocks in, and my wife is not on it, and then I want to have that, that money then owned jointly now because we got married, I have to sell those investments. I have to realize those gains a lot of the time in order to transfer the cash to a joint account. And then I have to buy those investments in in that joint account. You can't transfer assets like that from an individual account to a joint account without having some sort of tax problem. The IRS just doesn't allow for that. So some really cool news. We actually just released recently our whole financial planning process, completely complimentary. You can actually see our 4 foundational meetings that we have with clients online. All you got to do is go to that website, veterinary-advisors.com/mini-series. You get access to there's 5 videos total, but 4 videos that are from our foundational meetings. The first video that you'll see actually describes how we approach things, how we think. But this whole mini series, there's some things about business owners that are in there. There's some things about protection, insurance planning, cash flow management, all that kind of stuff. The secret to budgeting, the secret to creating a habit of savings, especially when you feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck. So, if this was helpful, hopefully you can get a little bit more bang for your buck from time spent with us. By just going to that website. You get completely complimentary, get to see all of our meetings from our financial planning process. And finally, if at the end of the day, you kind of like, I'm kind of overwhelmed by this stuff. I really need some help. I'd like to just meet with somebody and figure out how they can help me hold my hand and guide me through all these financial decisions so I don't have to weed through all the paperwork and all the decisions that are out there to make. And someone can just take me from A to Z without a whole lot of effort. Reach out to us. Go to our website, floridaveterinaryaadvisors.com, veterinaryaadvisors.com. Fill out our contact sheet. Somebody from our team will reach out to you, and we can schedule a 30-minute phone call with a qualified advisor, and maybe we can see if we can help you. So that's it. That's all I have for you today. My name is CJ Burnett. See you next time.